Hello, everyone. My name is Akhil Jayaprakash. I'm the founder at Pulse Energy. We've been starting this new podcast series. It's called Super EV Pod. The idea here is we want to go behind the headlines to meet the real superheroes of the energy transition. The fleet operators, the charging engineers, the farmers who are going electric, the people who are building the future one vehicle at a time. So today, my guest is Anirudh Arun. He is the CEO of Refex Mobility. He's built something that most people think is very impossible. A premium zero cancellation all electric fleets across 4 Indian cities. It's scaled up about 1,700 cars now and growing. I really want to understand what it actually takes to do this, the ops, the economics, the things that break when you actually start scaling this fast. So with that, what I'll do is I'll start off with the icebreaker, Anirudh. Think of it as like 5 rapid fire questions, like the Karan Johar style questions that's going to come your way. So the first question, one word to describe the Indian EV ecosystem right now.
Chaotic.
Okay. Range anxiety. Is it real or is it overblown?
Going away.
The one app on your phone you can't live without.
The same answer that all Indians will give you, WhatsApp.
If you're doing this, what would you be building?
Something for the welfare of animals.
Nice. And one last thing is one policy change that would change everything for EVs in India.
This is a toughie because there are so many things that we could be doing better. But I think more than policy change, I think policy stability. I'll just say that whatever you're doing, just hold it. Like, just don't keep changing your mind every 2 years. That's the worst thing you can do. So stability above everything else.
Perfect. Okay, so now let's get into knowing who you are, Anirudh. So, what were you doing before EV mobility? What really pulled you into this world? What was very attractive that started figuring out that, okay, I got to go build large fleets and especially in electric? What is that moment?
So, Akhil, first of all, thanks for having me here. It's good to be on the show. And yeah, now to answer your question, my entry into electric mobility was rather serendipitous. Back in 2019, there was nothing called e-mobility. There was definitely nothing called EV fleets, nothing at scale anyway. So I joined this company called Blue Smart when we had around 30, 40 cars on the road. Still trying to figure out what kind of business model might work. Is it a B2B? Is it a, fleet operator under various other platforms? Or is it a separate app and a B2C kind of a play? I think long story short, 6 years at Blue Smart and then more than a year here at Refex. I think building up EV fleets, building up that consumer side promise that will help people really understand what you're looking to build and, you're helping you acquire the right kind of consumers. I think that's been a, really telling experience. It's been something that has been life changing for me because I have learned so much over the last 7 years. And I hope, and I've just worked with incredible people. And it's just again, that serendipitous step one thing led to another, and then today at Refex also we operate close to around 1,800 cars in cities. I think you said 1,700 4 cities. It's 1,800 5 cities right now. But
Nice.
yeah, and looking forward to making this much bigger. So before EVs, I mean, I was very far away from the space. I was building a sports technology IoT wearables company. I was doing hardware before hardware was cool. We were building wearables for golfers and cricketers. And before that, I was in renewables and oil and gas, right? I mean, I was both in, I was in the entire transition of oil and gas economy for around 6, 7 years. So I think that's been the journey. These have been the last 7 odd years for me.
Wow, nice. Yeah, I didn't know you were in hardware, so that's a fun. This thing.
Yes.
I always figured you as a product
Yeah,
person.
for 5
All right.
years in hardware.
Nice. Yeah, I also started my journey in hardware, electronics
Yes.
hardware. So
We've had that conversation.
yeah. Awesome. So when Refex started, I think March 2023, they were just like 24 cars, right? Like, what was the vision then? Like, do you even at that point, and what is it now? Like, where do you want Refex Mobility to be, let's say 5 years from now?
So I think 2023 EV market was on a high. There were new players coming in everywhere and so many new fleets that came out just in the span of 23, probably just within the 2023 year. Few of them survive today. Many of them have pivoted or have unfortunately had to close down due to various reasons. But I think whenever a market is on the high, like today, everybody is doing an agentic AI or a AI startup, right? I mean, at some point, markets cool off and then a few people end up continuing. So I think that's the momentum with which Refex had also entered the space because EV was top of mind for everyone. EV was something that all corporates wanted to do, all their procurement teams and their ESG and sustainability global teams as well as India teams wanted to show the transition to net
Yep.
zero. And consumers were also talking about it a lot. Global warming and climate change were becoming more and more of an issue, especially we were fresh out of COVID and people understood the global impact of whatever we are doing. And then there were probably the couple of years that followed was a strange few years because the products didn't evolve as fast as they should have. Probably the economics did not
Mm.
shift as quickly as promised. And I think the few players who had slightly better strategies and maybe deeper, business continuity plans were able to survive the shift, right? Because ultimately tough times end up making sure that there is a consolidation and few people survive and take it forward. And then again, now you're seeing so many new players entering the market and so on and so forth. So it's again probably a Gen 3 kind of a wave. There was a Gen 1 wave, a Gen 2 wave, and probably a third wave, right? So yeah, but I think the vision remains, at least right now, firmed up towards premium, reliable, safe mobility across India for, corporates as well as high trust premium travel. And there is so much to be done here in the space. And yeah, happy to be here.
Awesome. Okay, so now let's sort of switch gears to understanding like how do fleets operate, right? Like what is the structures of it? And I know one of the biggest problem statement that all fleets face with is on the driver side, right? You're managing multiple drivers across cities. You talk about zero cancellation fleet systems. How do you build that reliably at scale?
So India's problem has never been, volume of workforce. I mean, we are the masters of volumes wherever we go, right? Whether it's FMCG or it's, services. I mean, it's everything, right? You just have incredible volumes that probably even, rivals China and probably beats China at a lot of the spaces that we actually operate in. The problem is standardization, processes, and that entire process driven scale and getting discipline into the process. Because again, there's we take, our demographics for granted as well. And we say that, hey, like we just need to increase the top of the funnel and then people keep coming in. Nobody bothers about how leaky the bucket is or whether you retain
Mhm.
people, etc., etc. That changes when you're looking to build in the premium and reliable space, whether it's in mobility or any other industry where you're building for the top 5% or top 10% of India. That makes a difference because there you cannot rely on pure volumes. You need to rely on volumes multiplied by some, quality factor and so on and so forth. And the quality is
Yes.
difficult to build and it's harder to sustain.
Mm.
And reliability is ultimately, the proof of reliability is in, experience. And nothing that I can do with a
Mhm.
marketing campaign can convince you that I am reliable or consistent. Indigo Airlines has not changed its promise from, on time, every time flights. But there is a marked change in customer perception towards Indigo from the 2021 to 3 period to today.
Mm.
The marketing
Mm.
campaigns did not change. The lived experience changed. The same way it happens for all brands. You need to deliver day in and day out. And if you do not, people will see through any kind of marketing speak that you come up with. So I think that's the most difficult part because ultimately you're
Mm.
not in a controlled environment when you are delivering the service that you're promising in mobility because all of these are distributed kind of systems that are not happening in a
Mhm.
factory environment or in an office environment. They're all happening in roads in multiple cities, often in low internet areas or in, remote outskirts of cities or in busy tech hubs. And each person's requirements can be different. And each driver may have so many different things that may be going on in their own lives. I mean, they might have had a bad day due to, n number of factors. How do you make sure that that doesn't come out during the trip where a passenger is sitting, where the passenger is also going through a lot of complexities in their life? There are two human beings. Fundamentally, it's very difficult to manage how two human beings will interact or even put a barrier and say that you are not allowed to interact because then that is just robotic. I mean, you can probably look at autonomous vehicles and stuff like that, but we are a little far away from that and probably given India's demographics, I'm not too much of a fan of that world, at least in the short term future. So that is the world you're building for. So I'm happy to go into specifics of how this is built, but the driver partner is
Mhm.
the X factor and the Y factor and the Z factor in building safe, reliable, clean, zero cancellation mobility.
And Ismay, so just to double click into this, right? And maybe, and the way I see this, under this, when you go from like 24 EVs to 1,800 cars today, I'm assuming you go through that life cycle, right? Like there is something where you start with 24 vehicles, one city. How do you nurture that? And then how do you nurture it in multiple cities? Question for you is, what are the different stages that you've seen? And maybe this can be just like three, there are just three phases, and this is the three phases that we go through. What do you have a picture of that in your head?
Yeah, so I think I wrote a post about this once. I think operations at the absolute early stages are about, n is equal to one kind of hyper personalized, interactions with each and every single person. So effectively, as a founder, you would end up interacting with every single driver partner yourself. You would have all their phone numbers on your phone. You would also speak to every customer yourself, and you would have their phone numbers on your phone. And you would try to take as much feedback as possible from your drivers and your customers. And you would you would be doing things that do not scale. So you would be doing things that are fundamentally antithetical to scale, like you would be actually assigning a certain driver for a certain customer because that is the arrangement that they would prefer, right? You would do a lot of those things until a particular scale where this becomes very difficult to manage, but you have also understood the guts of the business, because every interaction helps you build a mental model. Just like we train AI, we also train our own minds in the process of doing all of these things. And then we build a very strong mental model as to how things would work. Once we do that, we have stage two, which is building of processes. Now, when you build processes, and these are typically operational processes, this could be a mix of Google Sheets or the Atmanirbhar version of Zoho Sheets, or you could have, WhatsApp channels. There could be so many other workflows, or you could have like some kind of an emergent workflow right now where you have forms and sheets all integrated together and some AI enabled workflows and stuff. Ultimately, you build for the 80 or 90% habit. You can't handle all the exceptions here. Every exception is then manually handled, but you're trying to build processes that cater to a large set of whatever is going to happen in terms of interactions, and in terms of driver hiring, in terms of driver retention, in terms of this, connecting a driver and a rider and all of those things, right? And then this is the stage where you're going from, probably 1 to 10, right? Because the 0 to 1 stage was all very, very hyper personalized.
Founder.
The 1 to 10 stage is where you're building all of these processes. The 10 to 100 stage, and I'm guessing at Refex we are somewhere in the beginning of that phase, is where you productize, which means that you move from process to product, which means that you are trying to build in an anti-fragile kind of product, which actually tries to learn from, a lot of noise that happens around it, tries to handle as many exceptions as possible. And you're trying to build it into, actually you're actually quality checking the humans who were managing the process in the phase two, because those are also fundamentally prone to various human errors, informal arrangements, corruption. There could be n number of different things that can go into those process. But once you have a technology driven automation, that becomes what becomes truly scalable. But the important part about this stage is that you should not lose the heart of the process, because once you make it purely logical, very left brained, then you lose the touch on the driver side or the customer side, because ultimately humans are traveling, and that human edge is what often makes brands succeed or fail. So maintaining the heart as you build that product, I think, is the key in that stage.
And I'm very curious to understand what is that one single like process. If you can share this, give me one example of that process where in the 1 to 10 stage, this is how it was done, and 10 to 100, this is how we're thinking about it. Do you have something that you can call out?
Yeah. So in the 1 to 10 stage, for example, at Blue Smart and also at Refex, for example, what we would do is every single city that we operate in, every driver partner, they come into a hub and for onboarding. Then they would basically, you know, they would have heard about us through their friends or through some network, etc., etc. And then they would say that, hey, I wish to work. And then somebody would make them sit, and we would conduct a kind of an interview, would fill a form, and then you would check what they have done in the past. You would collect their documents. Then you would take them out for a driving test. Then the driving test would be done. And all of this would be captured. And the end of the day, somebody uploads all of this in a Google form. And then all of this gets captured. And then there's a background verification check that's triggered digitally, etc., etc. This is a process-driven stage where you can scale up to maybe 10,000, 20,000 drivers or something of that sort. Right? At some point, becomes this becomes the process becomes porous. There are a lot of loopholes, and you also realize that you desire more auditability in this process and stuff. So then, for
Mm-hmm.
example, one thing that we ended up doing, at the third phase is at every hub we would put a QR code outside the hub and say that if you have come here, please scan this code. Why? Because then earlier what we would get as complaints is that, hey, we turned up at your hub, but nobody conducted our interview, we went back, right? There is no way for me to know that these guys went back, right? So then there's a QR code, and that's a self-service. The guy comes in, he scans it. I get to know that this guy came, and if nobody attended to him, then I get to know why nobody attended to him. That question would be raised by the operations team, right? Now, once they in, all of the next steps also become digitalized, which means that the capture of the photo also happens through a tool. The guy just sits there, there's a webcam already in front of him, everything gets done, the Aadhaar upload, even upload their, they can do all of that remotely. They don't need to come in front of me and do it. They can sit down. There was a WhatsApp workflow wherein these guys can upload their documents. All of that would get pre-checked before this guy ever came and sat in front of an agent. And then
Oh,
once
wow.
the agent was there, he would just ask a few questions, and then he would mark the answers on an onboarding platform, so that ERP would capture what are the answers given by every driver. And then the driver's driving test would take place. The driving test would also be digitally scored on n number of parameters, like, is the guy, over speeding? What is the lane change? How do they use signal lights while changing the lane? Are they wearing their seat belt? All of those things, right? So you get to score all of that, and then that entire auditable record is now available for whether it's a corporate or whether it's our own operations team, etc., to check what this guy has done. So that is how you productize something that was existing in, processes before. But without these processes, there's no way to build the product because you don't know what to build, right? All of the understanding of how to build it only comes out of actually doing it. Otherwise, you can just sit down and, ideate with AI. Today, ideas are easy to build, but AI will give you a
Yeah.
lot of crazy ideas, which will skip steps, right? It doesn't understand yet probably well enough of what is this, what are the steps required to get there, right? So I think that's the way to do it.
Got it. This is a beautiful way, right? Like what I'm taking away from this is like 0 to 10 is sort of your experimentation of figuring out what the right process is. And 10 to 100 is essentially packaging it and saying, okay, I know what the process is. Now let me productize it and scale it. So I think that's a great way of example. Now, sort of getting into the economics of running these fleets, right? And I'll give you my sort of understanding of this. So if you're running like 100 cars or let's say 50 cars, I have seen the numbers where, yes, it does make sense. There is a good margin for people working on it. The problem where I've seen when it goes beyond 100 is where the margins and the operation starts shrinking, right? So what I want to try and understand from you is like, what do most people get wrong when running? What about the economics specifically when running an EV fleet in India?
Yeah, so a couple of things, right? One is I think ultimately exuberance gets the better of people. They underestimate the difficulty of complexity because a lot of these processes are linearly scaling. There are certain things that you can do to make them non-linearly scaling, but most fleets, I'll limit myself to what most fleets do. These are all linearly scalable results, which means that you add 1 unit of supply, you get n into 1 units of demand, right? Because you are already operating under, I'm assuming that you already have your demand sorted. I'm not talking about a case where you're also building demand. Like, for example, in a Blue Smart kind of a case, you are adding supply and you are also building your own brand and demand. So there you would have some level of non-linear scalability because initially people don't know your brand, and over time they get to know it. Your pricing power improves, your density of supply improves, etc., etc. But most fleets, I'll talk about most fleets in India today, they operate under, fixed contracts, or they would work under certain platforms, etc., etc., where demand is not fundamentally changing. The demand exists. It's like, you can consider it as there is infinite demand. It's like a big river flowing, right? Ganga ji beh rahi hai, and then you can go and do a snan in it. That's all, right? So
Correct.
you
Correct.
don't change the volume of water in Ganga ji, right? That's the difference. Now, keeping that fundamental thought process in mind, the only things that matter to a fleet are: one, asset utilization, which means that am I able to at least maintain the same level of asset downtime or asset uptime, so to say, as I scale up. The second is that am I able to get enough driver partners for my fleet and retain them sufficiently as I scale up, right? And third is whether I'm able to manage the asset life of these vehicles over time. So I think these are the three ultimately it's an operations problem, right? It's not, there is no marketing strategy, pricing problem here. It's just about running the cars because you have trips out there, right? Now the problem is that above a particular scale, a lot of fleets also have run into roadblocks in terms of the access to number of workshops, or the number of people who can help them actually ensuring that asset uptime, which means that maybe they don't have, when their cars are getting into repairs, maybe the workshop bay is not available. If the workshop bay is not available, the car is standing outside the workshop for an entire day waiting for getting in, right? That increases the tat of getting the turnaround time of your asset that is under the works, and therefore that would reduce your utilized asset utilization. That's number one. Number two that ends up happening is that fleets, it's a very difficult business out there. We say that India has a lot of unemployment, but people are choosy. And that's right for people to be choosy, because ultimately economics is not absolutely everything, right? It's not like just earning that extra 1,000 rupees every day is what's going to keep me going. People will value n number of other things, and they make choices at the edges all the time, which means that it may be easy for a fleet to fill 100 cars with drivers, but it may be very difficult for them to fill 500 cars with drivers, especially if all of them are located in a single geographical boundary or something like that. Because what is also happening is that just like this guy has an idea and scaled up from 100 to 500 cars, his neighbor also had an idea and he also scaled up to 200 cars, and his neighbor also scaled up to 500 cars. So suddenly there are 3,000 cars in the neighborhood, and all the 3,000 cars need drivers. And the driver is going to make a choice as to what is the best deal for him, right? Which means that it's very common that one driver partner would leave this guy and go to that guy, and vice versa as well, right? Because everybody, the grass is greener on the other side. All of these concepts play their part here. Driver partner management is a big issue, especially with the larger fleet sizes. A lot of fleets have had challenges in terms of just having enough drivers for all their cars, right? And the third part is asset life. In EVs, unfortunately, that's been a persistent problem. And today I'm a little more hopeful in the products that are out there, because the kind of resale value that you realize after running the car for 3 years, 4 years is very different from the resale value you realize from running a CNG, petrol or a diesel car for 3 years, 4 years. Because there you have a mature secondary market, and you also have a fairly established resale price, right? You could easily realize like 20 to 30, maybe even 35, 40% for cars that have run like, even 2.5 lakh kilometers, 3 lakh kilometers. And it's extremely difficult to do that in EVs, right? Because people are constantly wondering about what technological changes are happening. Is this becoming obsolete? What is the battery health? There are so many doubts about it, and that makes it a challenge.
And that's the like love the last point, right? I was just talking to one of the bankers, I think 2 days back, and he was like, he's got a request for financing 100 EV vehicles, and he's like, he's unable to finance it. He's like, he just doesn't know what the second life of the vehicle is going to be. And I was like, I was just sitting there, and I'm like, okay, that's a problem that needs to get solved in this industry, right? So okay, so if any fleet operator is just looking at this or listening to this, you're essentially saying one is the driver environment. How do you guys figure out, like, that's one thing? A supply side, how do you manage that? What is the most appealing one for those demand or supply partners out there? And the second one is on the vehicle or the asset itself. How do you manage the vehicles? How do you figure out second life of that vehicle? Now, I want to get into sort of figuring out, like, what's that one data point that should be on every single fleet operator's like operations dashboard? Do you have anything that you recommend for every fleet that's looking at this, that one KPI or two KPIs that they have to be constantly eyeing on?
So, see, some things are no-brainers, right? I mean, asset utilization is something that every fleet would be looking at. How many cars, if I own 100 cars, how many cars are running every day, right? That's classic, because that's the biggest lever on P&L, to be honest. Because if the cars are in the shed, they're not generating any economic value. And if there's no economic value, then effectively you're paying from your pocket, right? So that's something that's a no-brainer. I think the bigger challenge why fleets have probably not been able to do this in a structured, process-driven, high-scale manner is because I believe that we've been very transactional with drivers. I think the community and the fleet operators, at least the ones who have reached a certain level of scale, have become exceedingly transactional with driver partners, which means that the driver partners also have absolutely zero loyalty for the fleets that they operate for. And the same thing I can apply to all the other industries as well. Probably food delivery, quick commerce, all of this, right? Because ultimately we treat it as a warm body problem. We just need to fill this with somebody. Nobody cares what person it is. It can be a tall guy, a short guy, a South Indian guy, a, a, a Northeast Indian guy. It can be a female, it can be a male, it can be a 10th pass guy, it can be a graduate, it can be a postgraduate, it can be a guy who has already sold his startup and then is doing this in his spare time. And ultimately, they just want somebody to run the cars so that the cars are generating value. There is very few fleets, and there are few good examples in the country. And these are generally the people who have actually spent a lot of time in the industry. And probably that's why you realize that wisdom lies in people who have been there for long, right? There you see that there is some level of loyalty with drivers, which means that driver partners actually care that they are part of X business and not Y business. And they would not, choose to switch whenever somebody drops their price by 50 rupees and says that, you come to me, I'll give you cars at 50 rupee discount. You come and drive with me, right? So when you build that environment, that's the only time when you can actually, you're also contributing something of economic value to that person's family and that life, right? Otherwise, it's just that you are an option and they are an option for you, and everybody is like ruthlessly transactional, which is how India, truly operates, to be honest. So I think that driver retention, how long driver partners stay with you, what kind of, how much of money are they able to generate with you over their lifetime, and that lifetime being, expanding on a quarter-on-quarter basis. I think that's something critical that I would really like for businesses to take up, because it's not only the good thing to do, it's also economically valuable to them if they do it right. It is a hard thing to do. A lot of DNA would need to be rewired for some of them to do it, which is why it's not doing it. But the guys who are doing it are reaping benefits of this.
This neatly ties into that thing that we talked about, right? If a reliable service, if I have to, I care about the customer as well. Retention neatly ties into making sure that the customers also get a good experience while offering that service, right? Or taking the service from you. Perfect, man. So I'll go get into sort of moving on to the next segment, right? I want to kind of understand, what is that one skill or insight, Anirudh, that you have, which you believe is a superpower in what you're building?
I think curiosity. I think just keep figuring out things. Thing is nothing. The dust is never settled. It's always open to being unsettled at any point of time. Just understand and accept uncertainty in life, and build even though there is nothing certain, right? So I think that's the thing, right? And try to give as much certainty to people around you, even though the world is an uncertain place. So yeah.
Fair. Okay, so getting into sort of where is EV mobility headed, and this is the last segment that I want to cover. What's the single largest bottleneck right now for scaling EV fleets in India?
The EV products out there.
The car, essentially. And what do you think is the right fit? Like, what is your definition of a car that says, okay, if this is on the shelf, I'm going to buy thousands of it? Like, what is that?
I think the total cost of ownership would need to beat that of a robust CNG car. The CNG cars are fundamentally very, very robust, and driver partners, ultimately people are making economic choices here. So driver partners are choosing these cars because their upfront costs are low. The running costs of CNG are not very high. I mean, at least compared to other fuels, except electric. Electric is cheaper, but CNG is not too expensive.
Right.
And the resale value you get of these cars are also decent, right? This is effectively what the holy trinity of decision making that people use. If they use this, and EVs don't measure up in many of these things, right? Except maybe the running costs, which are lower than CNGs. The upfront cost and the resale costs are both heavily tilted towards the CNG vehicle. So, so I think those are fundamentally the challenges, and that would require, to be honest, the specs. There can be various specs. There are certain specs that are more suited towards employee transportation. There are certain specs that are more suited towards intercity rides. There are certain specs that are more suited towards airport transfers and rentals and stuff like that. So ultimately, I think that India will benefit from strong competition and strong indigenization of technology, which will also come through global partnerships to start with. But then we'll have to figure out how to bring cutting edge technology in and then build on it internally. But it cannot be black box tech that you just use from Taiwan and China, that you don't even understand the spec sheet because it's written in Mandarin, and then just put it into the car and and hope and pray that things work right. That's not the way it will work. But I understand that we've already gone through a 6-year transition period in EVs. I think now is the time when you actually start working on all of these things, and this would require more investment in the space, and it would require more competition coming in. And it's good to see the Winfast coming in. It's good to see MG and JSW doing so much in the space. Tatas, of course, have brought in a lot of EVs across their entire line, but it's more retail focused right now, which is also good. You should have adoption, a lot of adoption on the retail side. Stellantis is in here. BYD, I'm hoping, will play a bigger part because they have been global pioneers. And I hope maybe even the likes of Tesla are able to do something in the market. They are still very premium priced, but I'm hoping that they would be able to do something interesting here.
Awesome. Okay, so last question. Someone's listening to this, right? And then they're evaluating, EV mobility EV fleets is something that I want to do. Sitting in a tier 2, tier 3 city. As a founder, as an operator, what is your honest advice to them? Should they do it? What are the things that they need to look out for?
My honest advice is do fleets of which EVs are a part. Do not do EV fleets, because ultimately, if you do fleets, you will be able to move towards EV when the time is right. I don't think you get any bonus points for ensuring that there is no other fuel type in your fleet and you have only EVs. I mean, there are no prizes for that. So do what is right for the consumer and always push the products, push the charging infra, push everything to improve in the EV side of things, but do what is right for your business and your consumer.
Awesome. All right, Anirudh, thank you so much, man. Just for the audiences, I think Anirudh just showed us what it takes to help scale up a fleet. He talked about the journey from like 24 vehicles to 1,800 vehicles across 5 cities. The complexity, the driver management, the charging, the city by city complexity. If you're an EV owner navigating even a fraction of this complexity, this is the reason why we are developing these podcasts as well. The app called Super EV. It's India's super app for everything in EVs. Every charging session, every a vehicle decision can be taken inside that. The links in the podcast. If you like and subscribe, that'll be something that we would love to again put these word out. I think Anirudh is a great person running, Refex. I've seen him in both the avatars. Had those discussions, and I think this is a great forum for people to understand. Okay, what does it take to run a EV fleet? And I think I personally learn a lot. So, Anirudh, thank you so much.
Thanks, and it's good being
Take care,
here
man.
and nice podcast series, and looking forward to seeing more of this. Thank you.
Awesome.
See
All
ya.
right, chalo. See you, man. Bye.